Arrow Video has just released a new edition of 2007's Trick or Treat. Some people call it Trick or Treat because that's how it's spelled, not to be confused with Trick or Treats from the 80s or Trick or Treat from the 80s. This is Trick or Treat. This is the Warner Brothers released, although initially they didn't, anthology horror film that has become just phenomenally popular in the ensuing decade or more since it came out. This is a film that I saw originally Trick or Treat, it was like it played at like a festival or something, and Warner Brothers wasn't going to release it, or they were going to go straight to video with it, and there was a controversy in the fan community because they really thought this should be a theatrical release, and eventually it went straight to video, and it just has snowballed since then. You probably know the character of Sam, the seemingly little boy with the burlap sack tied around his neck, Christmas they probably have Christmas ornaments of it by now. Halloween costume, that's sort of the iconic image from this movie. It was directed by Michael Dougherty, and it stars or features a lot of familiar faces, included but not limited to Anna Paquin, Brian Cox, Dylan Baker, Leslie Bibb, and Tamo Pennicott, who was big on the Battlestar Galactica Sci-Fi Channel series at the time. It's 82 minutes. It is presented. What I'm talking about here is the 4K UHD HDR edition. I believe they also put out a new Blu-ray edition of this. The version I get is, I don't have it next to me. The version I get is very basic. The version I get, I don't have it next to me. It's just a clear case with a white disc, so I don't get all the extras. I know that these editions that Arrow is putting out of this movie are like loaded with tuck-ins and posters and books and mini cards and all this other stuff. I'm just going to tell you what's on the disc of the 4K itself. The movie itself. So I initially saw this, as I started to say, when there was a lot of talk online and people were outraged that Warner Brothers wasn't putting it out, and there was petitions and please release this movie and all this other stuff. I was able to see a copy via nefarious means at the time, and I didn't get what the big deal was. So I have not watched it again since then until this 4K came out. The 4K looks great, by the way. And I still don't really like this movie. I want to like it more than I do. I feel like the movie it's very like, sort of like that nihilistic, mean-spirited thing that's like a very early 2000s vibe where you kind of hate most of the characters, or most of the characters are shown to be nasty and terrible, and it's just like it plays like a long or a feature film version of like a Tales from the Crypt to a degree, but I liked Tales from the Crypt more. So I gave it another shot again. It's certainly well made. It looks great. The cast is great. Technically everything about it is great. I don't like the stories personally. So I'm going to tell you about what this is, but just know that I don't like this movie, unfortunately. Or I wish I liked it more than I did, which is to say it's a movie I don't think I need to see again. So it's got 4 stories in it, characters from which can be seen spotted in other places in the film, which is kind of interesting. It all takes place in a small Ohio town on Halloween night. It is a very Halloween-y movie. It is set on Halloween. It feels like Halloween. And I think that might be a large reason why this film has taken off so much. Is there's a lot of horror movies, not a lot are set on Halloween, and not all of those really give you that Halloween vibe as hard as Trick or Treat does. One story is about a couple returning home from a night out on Halloween, and they get a dark surprise when they're taking their decorations down. Another one is about this mischievous brat who pilfers candy from his principal's house and gets a dark surprise. Another is about kids venturing to the site of an infamous local bad thing that happened, and they get a dark surprise. Another is about college-age female students on the prowl or female friends on the prowl for dates on Halloween night, and those dates come up against a vampire, and they all get a dark surprise. And then the last in episode is Brian Cox as an old curmudgeon who meets a little boy in that titular Sam the Sackhead costume, and he gets a dark surprise. So it looks great. The practical effects are phenomenal, but for me the stories are just kind of weak. You know, I don't get the love for it personally. It's ambitious with the crisscrossing of characters and all that, but the shocks and a lot of the twists, they just don't, to me, make a lot of sense if you try to think about them for very long. So it uses the John Carpenter font in the credits. Clearly a Carpenter fan. And I think they say in the extras that Brian Cox wanted his hair or makeup to make him look like John Carpenter, which was kind of interesting. So special features on the 4K. You get a new commentary with writer-director Michael Dougherty, moderated by James A. Janice and Chelsea Rebecca from the Dead Meat podcast. So they're looking back at the film with a lot of hindsight and what has happened, his thoughts on the film, looking back on the production and where it's gone since it was not really released. There's an archival commentary, which I presume is just from the first DVD release, with Michael Dougherty, conceptual artist Breen Burns, storyboard artist Simon Wilkins, and composer Douglas Pipes. There's a new featurette called Becoming Sam, and that's a new interview with Quinn Lord, who played Sam, the burlap sack character. That's interesting to see that person reflecting back on what it was like being a kid actor making it and what it has brought him in terms of fandom since then. That's 9.5 minutes. You get The Devil is in the Details. That's a new interview with production designer Mark Freeborn. That's 12 minutes. You get If Looks Could Kill, which is a new interview with director of photography Glenn McPherson. That's 17 minutes. You get Designs to Die For, which is a new interview with costume designer Trish Keating. That's 15 minutes. You get Bark at the Moon. So there's a lot of new stuff on here. New interview with renowned creature designer Patrick Tatopoulos as he delves into the creation of iconic movie monsters. That's 9 minutes. You get Mark Freeborn Remembers Bill Terazakis, which is a discussion of the late makeup designer. That's 3 minutes. You get multiple image galleries. You get one that's just stills. That's 67 images. Storyboard and conceptual artwork gallery, 230 images. Behind the scenes gallery, 155 images. Monster Mash comic book set in the Trick or Treat universe. That's 18 minutes. Unfortunately, it's presented a full page at a time, so it's really hard to read. I mean, I've got a pretty big TV, and I was getting up close, and I'm like, yeah, this is really hard to read. It's a shame that they didn't break out each of those panels as its own still image where possible. That would have made it a little bit more entertaining. Archive extras. You thought I was done. Archive extras. Tales of Folklore and Fright. It's a featurette including interviews with Michael Dougherty, Breen Burns, and Simon Wilkins. That's 16 minutes. These are all from the previous DVD release or Blu-ray. Tales of Mischief and Mayhem interview with Michael Dougherty on making the film, 20 minutes. Sounds of Shock and Superstition features interviews with Michael Dougherty and Douglas Pipes, 11 minutes. Tales of Dread and Despair featurette with Michael Dougherty and Rob Galuzzo of the Shockwaves podcast discussing the film's release and fandom. That's 7 minutes. Season's Greetings. It's the short film directed by Michael Dougherty with and has an optional commentary by him. This was the short animated film that where the Sam character made its debut and sort of inspired this movie, as it were. So the Lore and Legends of Halloween is a featurette narrated by Brian Cox. It's 27 minutes. That's a half hour. In case you can't round up from 27. School bus VFX comparison. That's sort of what it looked like when something happens with the school bus in the film, as opposed to the actual footage that was shot and how they achieved that effect. That's just a minute, but it's really interesting. Additional scenes deleted and alternate scenes with optional director commentary, 17 minutes. FearNet, remember FearNet? FearNet promos that are 4 minutes. Sam O'Lantern, it's an hour. It's like a Yule log, but it's a Sam-style jack-o'-lantern on a sidewalk with things going on in the background. I think it loops, but it's an hour of that. So if you want to put that on around Halloween time and just have that in the background like the Yule log, that's on there for you. And then the trailer, which is 2.5 minutes. So again, it's not a movie that I enjoy, but if you enjoy this film, I hope, this is all the extras that were on previous editions with a bunch more. And the film looks better than it ever has before. So available on, I think there's a Blu-ray version, and I think there's a 4K version of this from Arrow Video, is 2007's Trick or Treat.